What's up, guys? We're back with the 27th episode of the 5D Warrior podcast. We have a special guest today, the Reverend.
We are talking all things wild with our good friend, the Reverend. So what are we going to be getting into, Billy?
First, this is a disclaimer. You're going to want to buckle up and get ready for this ride. First off, I'm not sure if you two have heard about this yet, but they found that there are certain monkeys, and specifically I believe it was gorillas, that are finally able to make stone tools.
Really?
They've
Where is that at?
I can't remember exactly where that was at, but they said it happened early in October, and it was at a zoo that they actually recognized it at. I think it might have been India.
So gorillas in India were found making tools.
You guys should get a fact check.
Weaponry.
Yeah, we should get a fact check.
Yeah. Only facts on the 5D podcast, though.
Yeah.
For real.
Okay, so these primitive tools show how intelligent apes can be. Do you think that could lead to some sort of self-awareness in those apes creating those tools?
I most definitely think so. I actually think that they might be going through the same revolution that we endured earlier in our evolution, and it only makes sense that them being so closely related to us, why would you think they couldn't do something of the sorts? Why do we as humans assume that we're the only ones capable of higher consciousness or creating anything like in terms of art? Like, we know for a fact that our ancient ancestors that were Neanderthals weren't capable of making art and memorabilia pieces and clothing, design, and pictures and stuff. We see it in cave paintings, but they also have headdresses that they had made, which expresses their culture. And a lot of people aren't aware of that our species didn't just come and evolve from Homo sapiens. We were a mixture of Denisovians, red deer people of China, Neanderthals. They all kind of mixed together at the same time and gave way to us. So monkeys could have been doing the same things while we weren't paying attention to them.
And you think about Planet of the Apes, and you see that could be a sort of predictive programming type deal there. And we also have Coco the gorilla. Are you familiar with Coco? Coco the gorilla, I believe she passed away a couple of years ago, but she was able to do sign language. They taught Coco how to do sign language, and before Coco passed away, because they knew she was going to pass, they interviewed Coco through using sign language, and Coco was basically saying, I am you guys are me. Like, Coco was talking about oneness consciousness, but she was saying that humans are stupid. She said humans are dumb because
ignorant,
humans,
I think, is the best word.
Ignorant, yes, and we're ignorant because we're destroying the earth. And she said the animals are sad. She said Coco's sad because like they see it, and she says the trees see you, we see you, and humans are bad. And this goes back to like the idea that I think gorillas and monkeys and apes of sorts are on their way to self-awareness. I believe they already do have self-awareness because Coco said, I am Coco.
You could see these communities in aquatic animals like dolphins and whales as well.
And manatees.
And manatees, yeah I believe. And sea
those
otters as well.
Dolphins are
very intelligent. Very intelligent. And they have a certain sense of community and their own languages, colonies, and ways of communicating with each other through different vibrations of sorts, different frequencies.
I wonder what actually goes on in dolphins.
Yo, one thing special about dolphins is when used to birth and bring children into this world, there's an old ancient like ritual used where dolphins actually, you birth the baby in water, but dolphins actually swim around you while you're giving birth, and they are such high vibration, they create like almost a vortex of sorts, and those babies always come out stronger, more intelligent, just better children at the end of the day.
That's funny that you say that, because I do see a lot of videos of dolphins approaching young children, especially, and kissing them.
There's also a law that we cannot interact with dolphins outside of like places like SeaWorld and like aquariums and stuff. It is illegal to make contact with dolphins. And
Wonder
why. And also to note that those ancient rituals, there was a site in Hawaii where they did dolphin births, and it was actually shut down by the government.
Oh, that's not surprising.
And that ties into how the government wants us to be in a low vibration. They're coming after our children with the food, mainstream media, all this stuff, vaccines. They're just projecting all this stuff on our children to make us lower vibrations.
They really are
on.
trying to close the minds of the masses. And Plato's Allegory of the Cave is the best example of how most of our population is currently facing and stuck. So Plato's Allegory of the Cave best describes how most of our population currently looks to be facing at the moment. They are stuck looking in the darkness, for lack of better terms. They don't realize that there is more insight, more intellect, more channels of learning information than social media. Like, they're really caught up in something that is almost fabricated.
We have more information at our disposal and use than any other time in the history of our world currently. But people are so trapped in distraction that they choose not to learn. I think that people in our society, through the education system, are almost conditioned to not pursue learning and education because it's so drawn out and boring and mundane, and they don't teach stuff that actually applies to you directly in your life.
Yeah, and Plato was talking about how people, like common people, almost they need to be ruled, right? But they should be ruled by, like, he used like a philosopher king, right?
Free thinkers.
A free thinkers, and that everyone should think for themselves. And the idea of the allegory of the cave is that humanity is just at such low consciousness that they need something to look up to, but it can't be a figure of authority or power that is used to control. And you see, way back in the day, people like Socrates and Plato were put to death for preaching this oneness consciousness, this free thinking society ruled by philosophers in a sense, because philosophers know and understand how to use power for good and not evil. And even today, in today's world, we see all the censorship. Like they're taking political figures and people speaking the truth off of these platforms and almost putting them to death where they can't. Because if you can't speak, what else do you have left?
Which happened to Socrates.
Exactly.
Yes. Happened to Plato. Right? Then wasn't Plato executed?
Pretty sure, probably.
We'll fact check that.
Fact check. I'll pull it up.
Fact check us live.
Live.
fact check. I'm also going to look up where those
How did
monkeys came from.
You're checking out live fact checking because the thing that we need in our society is truth, and we keep truth in line.
Plato either died while being serenaded by a Thracian flute-playing girl at a wedding feast or in his sleep.
My bad, it was not India, it was Brazil, and it's the Capuchin monkeys. Tool use is a tradition.
Where is
Plato-
that?
In Brazil.
Interesting.
Plato
Similar
wasn't
to our-
necessarily executed. Some believe he died in his sleep, and some believe he was serenaded by a flute girl and made possibly poisoned. But most people think he just died in his sleep peacefully.
Fair enough.
It's better than Socrates.
Good for Plato.
And better than Galileo.
Yes.
So we were talking about media being controlled by the government and censorships.
Yes.
What do you think the next step is as a society to kind of put out the fire that we have caused over the last years?
How should we go about putting it out? I think it starts with like the idea of Plato and those other philosophers in the idea that we must be free thinkers. We can't change the construct of our society unless we open our minds and expand our consciousness and see through the veil that we're living in this. Like we were talking before, you said you don't like the idea of simulations, but it's like we do live in a holographic universe because like these people, these higher entities are keeping us in control from an outside at different frequencies of sorts. And once you can break through that and expand your consciousness, but you can only do it by being open-minded and free thinking. And right now we just have absolutely no free thinking going on. Everyone gets their news from the same sources. They're all owned by the same governmental companies, big corporate companies, the technocrats, all of these people.
We consume creation more than we actually create nowadays, and we're seeing the creations of these big media, big tech companies that people are just completely engulfing their mind with corporations.
Yeah.
Just this corporate message, this corporate America, corporate global corporations just pushing one message, one narrative onto the population, and people aren't aware of the interconnectivity between those organizations.
Yeah, like the Great Reset, all of the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, all of these, the United States of America, all of these big countries that come together and start pushing the same narrative. And then you add in the billionaire technocrats that have been put into these positions of power at these global governmental like policies and stuff, and it's all just pushing an agenda.
I agree, and I think we realized this loss of consciousness in humans most recently when we started losing oral traditions and religions and all these types of culture and cultural bases that we used to rely on in order to raise children and basically have society revolve around. But as we're losing all these things, whatever happened to people almost find it obscure to hear of such things as skinwalkers or these interdimensional beings where they're almost as a spirit guide. And you could say it's religion or any type of tradition, it's all there. It's all the same thing necessarily. It's something leading them away, and it's not something we are necessarily familiar with, nor can we see all the time. It's something that it's secretive for a reason. And I think this, with all social media and the way that we're corrupting the image of ourselves as humans, even in the minds of animals, maybe we have to take a turn back and go back to our roots and figure out where we could have went wrong.
Yeah, and I think you brought up religion, right? People are so, at least in Western culture, disassociated with the religious part of themselves, the spiritual part of themselves, because they just look at an external God and don't look inside themselves, and then they take no control over their actions, they take no responsibility. But you bring up Eastern philosophy, Eastern religions, and these people are about oneness and love, light, all this good stuff, and you see them, they're the people raising the children, living in like smaller shelter, but living as one, living connected with their families, and everyone's super close. And they're trying to put us in cities in America to keep us super close, but keep us blinded, right? And America has the population has been decreasing over time, and you see naturally, but you see in like these other Eastern countries, even like Muslims, for example, like they follow the code of Allah, like strict by the books. But over there, they live much better lives. Whereas they might not be as free, you would think, but they live better. They don't necessarily want to be because they just live by Allah and they raise their children. Each wife has 6, 7 children. She's devoted to her husband through and through, doesn't look at any other guys. And it's like they follow this book religiously, and we're not doing that in Western society. And I think that's where this spiritual aspect and this religious aspect can tie into your life, because when you live by a code, you live a much more prosperous life.
I think there's a general fear, however, for cultures that still hold tightly to God. And
I would agree.
Listening to God is one thing, but living your whole life strictly based off of those decisions of something that is out of your hands, you need to put control into your own life too. God tells you this. You could be just as ignorant, blindly following God and not listening to anything else, as you are by not following any sort of spiritual or like religious or calling or anything at all.
I think a lot of people don't even understand which God they're truly even aspiring their life towards and dedicating their life towards, because many people will follow religions without fully understanding like the depth of the stories and like what they're actually meaning. Because think about all these ancient teachers and enlightened beings, they were speaking parables. And it was up to their interpretation.
And some were speaking in tongues.
Yes, and some were speaking in tongues.
And that gets to my point where, do we even know if these religions we follow are correct? How many times have they been rewritten? How many times have things been taken or added to them? How many times have they been transcribed and tried to be deciphered? Like, do we even know if we have the correct meaning of these languages?
Think about the interconnectivity of all the documents as well, those ancient documents, and how many of the stories you can see the similarities of sorts.
There is such a strong similarity between all religions. It's such a shame that people fight over it all the time. But since some of them are nearly identical up until a couple different prophets.
Yeah, and I agree. And back to the Muslims or like Eastern philosophy, like although they might follow it blindly, they still have like a religious aspect and a code that they follow. Now, I don't think this is necessarily the right way to go about God and a spiritual life, because I think that it's all just consciousness, and by looking and following stuff blindly, you're essentially you might be open-minded in the theory of God, but you're closed-minded in the belief that you're just following Him.
Yes.
Like you're not looking inside yourself to experience Him and like fully appreciate what He has to offer, unless you take that and look inside yourself and see it in yourself and in others.
And a lot of people get hurt when people say like I am God, but it's said a lot of times in a less egotistical sense, and more of being God with exactly an understanding of like I am God, but as are you, and as is this whole entire universe and this organism of Earth that we get to live.
That's a fact.
That's a fact, Jack.
That's a fact.
Don't need to check that one.
There's no reason to get like in arguments or fights over like these religious or political beliefs, because when you understand, not even political, but just religious, that all of the stories overlap and we're all essentially following the same thing if you hold on to those religions. But when you take away the religion and just look at it as a spiritual path and look inside yourself and understand that God is within you, then we can be on a better path. And that's why Eastern countries and stuff like that, they live better lives now than maybe in the Western world.
But possibly, do you think Socrates could argue that they are just as trapped as the people in the cave would be if they're strictly only following
I would agree.
just that?
I would agree.
You lose, with the sense of belonging to a religion, you also lose your ability to free think.
Yes, 100%. I agree.
There should be this nice, peaceful medium where we could all find where we're able to advance civilization that way.
I think that's where oneness comes into play, because I think when you understand it as God as consciousness, and you can see it in yourself and in everybody, everyone can meet in that middle ground, in that gray area, and just come to peace with it. And don't associate your life with religious texts or anything like that, because if you just follow your own moral code that was put into us, like at the basis of our genetics, like there's something I learned, like even children have like a moral code.
Yeah.
There was like this guy, Jonathan Haidt, who did research on little infants, and like he would give them there was 3 babies in a room, he'd give them 3 toys, all the babies are happy, he'd take away a toy, and then one baby would take 2 toys, and the other 2 babies that were left with no toys would fucking conspire on him.
Oh.
But then they would essentially like attack them because they know it's wrong. But then when a parent would walk in the room, all the babies would stop, because it shows that we hold this moral compass within us at the basis of our genetic code, but we're also at the basis of our genetic code subject to authority.
Sounds a lot like the Reverend.
Yeah, the babies were subject to authority, and how do, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we need that authority, and that was what Plato was talking about, but it can't be of control, it must be of, like, oneness, essentially.
Devotion and freedom are, like, 2 things that should go hand in hand, because, like, you think about those religions with super strict rules and you can't step outside the boundary. But if you could express whatever devotion you may have or practice spiritual or religious, but have the freedom to do it how you please or see fit, I think that's probably going to be the most optimal way for you to actually connect with that. Because if you're being forced into these environments and forced into these situations, you're naturally going to have a resistance towards it. But if you're willingly putting yourself out there and devoting yourself to whatever God it may be, I think you'll find much more peace in your life.
And I think that's a mindset. It's whether you want to be out there living the open, positive life that you could endure, or you decide to close it and focus on the negatives and dwell on those aspects that are going to make you feel worse and, in effect, make you have negative consequences on your actions. It's a dark spiraling hole that most people fall into. It's easily avoidable.
And it's like when we talk about in our other podcasts, when you observe everything that's happening to you and you don't identify with it, that puts you in a place where you're just accepting the universe and accepting the oneness in everyone and accepting the God in everyone. And much better than pushing against that.
And I think currently a lot of people are pressured to identify as something in this day and age. I don't think that's something that you should put. That stress should not be put on people. You don't have to identify as anything. There's plenty of people in history that didn't identify as anything. They were like oracles and stuff.
Yeah.
They gave their lives up to some other calling, whether they were inhaling natural gases that got them high or not. Who knows? But they made a life and a career off of it, and they didn't identify as anything out of the ordinary. They weren't really a person, and people understood that. It was kind of just like an essence. Almost like an interdimensional.
Just simply a being, not actually a man, a woman, a child.
Just a being.
Just a being. Because at your inner core, that's what we are. We're human beings, right? And
that's why you got to tap into the soul, because you can feel the soul vibrating when you sit down in meditation. And you got to unlock that being in yourself, because it's being suppressed at every freaking aspect of your life, whether it's religion or not. And you got to really tap into that shit.
It's hard to get your frequencies going in the correct manner nowadays with different radios and all that going on above you, which you don't even see, which does also mess with people too, if you think about it. That's something that's usually not talked about enough.
And these different radiations and frequencies,
all those
like
radio
EMF
waves.
And 5G
You got
and how
AM,
it's messing with your phone. You've seen
Hummingbird just flew.
Oh wow!
That was wild.
You've seen the video when they plug in the phone with the EMF radiation sensor. When it's unplugged, it doesn't have much of a field around it, but when it's plugged in, it's like very hazardous to your brainwaves. Like within 3 feet of your head, like many people sleep with their phones like that every night, which is just like essentially just dumbing you down in these low vibrations.
It lowers your testosterone as well.
Exactly.
I'm sure there's birth effects.
Because people, look, I got my phone in my pocket right now, and it's giving, although it's not plugged in or anything, it's still giving off somewhat of EMF radiation. And I have that next to my private parts, and it could be lowering my test a little bit. So you know what I'm gonna do?
Nice.
Get that.
Because when you think about when you guys think about vibration in terms of everything, like
shoes are also
when everything is a vibration.
Humans don't need shoes.
These low vibrations that you can't perceive, like these radio signals, TV, etc., like these low frequencies, are just interfering with your high frequency. And you got to get back into
it. The Reverend would love this guy. The Reverend, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but have you ever heard of the Barefoot Sensei?
I think I have heard of the Barefoot
Mick Dodge, the Barefoot Sensei. And essentially, Mick Dodge.
No, that's not the same person.
Yes, it is. Mick Dodge is the Barefoot Sensei.
Is he?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
He walks around. He did. I forget where he was. I'm pretty sure he was in South America, and he like walked through like the jungle essentially barefoot, and just like lived it through in the jungle, and just like walked barefoot like everywhere. Like he walked miles and miles across countries and shit. But if he can do that, why the fuck do I need to wear shoes in my everyday life?
Our ancestors did that. They didn't wear shoes. And when do you think shoes were invented?
Look at that! Look at that foot! Look at that! Look at that spread right there. That's a spread for the camera.
Can't spread that.
I should make an OnlyFans. But clip it. But like people lose the ability of that foot spread and the stability. People have back issues, hip issues, knee issues, etc. because of shoes. And their toes are getting.
You literally can't even run the same way when you wear shoes. No. We were the one species that is able to sweat and outrun like a cheetah if we had to. If we were given enough space to try to outrun.
Let's get back to the chimpanzees and the gorillas and the monkeys and all these apes
to
who could literally beat us the fuck up. I saw a video.
Think about how strong an orangutan that's 60 pounds is.
I saw a video, orangutan in a zoo. Some dude was fucking with it. It grabs him. The orangutan grabs him.
Stronger than a UFC
fighter. Whole entire, every single limb wrapped around. The claw. His feet are hands.
He's lucky that's all he did.
Why did we lose that? Because we're in shoes all day.
Those things could rip you apart. They could take your arms. They could spread both your arms apart and pull them off your body.
Are we supposed to be the alpha species on this planet? The most dominant apex predator on the planet? And we're getting beat up by orangutans behind bars.
Well, I don't think necessarily we're supposed to be the most apex
we're not
predator
the
on the
strongest
planet.
I think we are.
It's our intellect that has allowed us. It's these two hands that, like thumbs, that you're able to.
We made guns.
We made guns, exactly. The thumbs allow us to
worry
make
about
tools
hand
and weapons.
combat.
Yeah.
Wait till the apes make guns, though.
Yeah, they're on their way.
Do you think the apes could make guns?
Dude, they just got to go through the Copper Age, the Silver Age, Gold Age.
Yeah, just a little
soon
bit
enough.
Soon enough.
If Planet of the Apes gets to the 5D, they're on their way there. They're already making tools.
But John, you're right. Our ancestors, like the Neanderthals, Denisovians, Red Deer people, they are much stronger than us too. They can beat the living crap out of any one of us.
But let's talk about why. Because they were in the sun all day. They were eating.
I hate to break it to you, but that's not why. They actually had a stronger bone density than
I'm sure they did.
10 times stronger.
You don't think it has anything to do with
it has
foods
to,
they were
It has to do strictly with how they were. These people, they cooked their food, if you didn't know.
No, I know, but they also ate other things such as organs and shit.
And they didn't have these harmful chemicals and etc.
They would
they
ate organs in times of lack of other foods. They were the people that discovered drying out stuff and like salting things in order to like make jerkies and stuff. They did discover those and things like that. They would eat. They often didn't let anything go to waste, but there were certain times and certain things that required them. And you're right. But the biggest part is that they were on their feet most of the day. They were active. They were moving to their next home that they were going to sleep at. These people weren't sitting around playing video games or sitting in trucks driving for like 8 hours a day. They were active. They were hunting. They were constantly on the move. And they were also being hunted constantly. Their survival came in packs. Their survival came with the whole reason we're here is because one of them decided to try cooking food. Literally, that caused our brain to literally develop it and basically start foaming out like a science project. That action also became one of the most dangerous things for humans. It became a danger to bear children. You were at risk of dying now because our brains had developed so much. When you were to bear a child, you could, and even today, if it wasn't for the medicines and the hospital health, yeah, literally people deciding to start studying women. I don't know why it took so long for doctors to think, oh, we should probably know about them too, but it became a danger.
Because men are arrogant.
Most likely. It became a danger for humans to survive because of our brains, because of this fire that we had found and we had used for our food, which gave us the right nutrients that we needed in order to develop our brains that way, in order to outsmart our predators, in order to catch prey and live longer. Because these people, let's face it, even at their best, like they probably lived to like 28.
Yeah. It's funny how you think about it, how we went and gained that consciousness, that self-awareness, intelligence to actually build societies and stuff from light too. Like we just were the first beings on our planet to be able to harness our own light in a sense of like controlling it, and like that's what sparked this self-awareness, transmutation of energy, exactly. And it sparked this kind of consciousness moving forward. Think about monkeys, like where in our history did we go from non-self-awareness to awareness? Like you talked about the Denisovians and the Neanderthals, etc. Like where did we actually become intelligent?
I think it's way earlier than that, and you could look at Arthropithecus. That is the first, our very first obvious ape ancestor. It was the first one to start jumping out of the trees in Africa, in the sub-Saharan Africa, and they started walking on their feet, and it's believed that they were the ones who actually could have started the first growth in our development for brain functioning by eating possible fungi that grew around Africa, which has proven that there was stuff that could do that around
Stoned ape theory?
Stoned ape theory, yes, correct.
We could talk about the
But Arthropithecus was the first human ancestor to stop climbing the trees and to start walking and roaming and moving place to place. That's when they developed different types of bone structures in their feet than other types of apes, where they're able to endure this long type of travel, and they're also upright. That's what Homo sapien means. There's a little science class for you. It means upright being. It's upright monkey. Mm-hmm. So that's all that it means. It doesn't mean wise.
Well, I think being able to be upright and have the ability to use these hands and not be all over the place, climbing trees and everything, and be stationary in one spot, you get to create things like tools and, like we said, fire and these different things. Like these hands are like what allows us to become so intelligent.
Do you ever have like your animals look at you like when you're picking stuff up, and they almost look like jealous that they don't have thumbs.
Yeah, facts.
Like my cats, like I feel bad. Like I'll pick something up and they'll just be there, like trying to move the paws around. They're like
No,
trying
but if you really think about it, our hands are the only thing that gives us the ability to play God.
God bless hands.
God bless hands. Good shout. But God, our hands are God's because our hands allow us to participate in the creation, and it allows us to
it lets us
express
make
our
things,
godness and our humanness and create. And that's all this is. It's just constant creation, infinitely for forever.
Infinite
all
creation and
eternity.
infinite universe. I would imagine an infinite God in all of it, and we're infinite beings. But what's not infinite?
What's not infinite? Time on this podcast. Okay, today's call out.
I thought there was more time.
Who we calling out? The Reverend.
Kevin Spacey,
Oh, why do we want to call out Kevin Spacey, Reverend?
just an evil dude, does evil things.
Oh,
You gotta heighten your consciousness and understand, and come out of the shadows to see that Kevin Spacey and those other people in our corporate America are the problem.
parts, the big club, and you're not in it. Say it every podcast.
Let's start our new club.
We should.
This is the
We're
new-
starting the new club. We're starting
New
the
club.
5D club.
5D club.
We're
This is not a
awakening
cult,
this
though.
Earth consciousness.
And you're
not a
all
cult.
welcome.
No.
This is not a
No,
cult.
when you think about it, cults made a lot of sense because, like, they tell you. Time out. Yo, clip it.
Jim Jones just tweaked in his grave.
Wait.
He's going,
Think about it. We just
I will
talked.
tell you why they're bad.
Listen, I know.
They
Time out. No,
take away free thinkers.
No,
They
this is-
are also bad.
No, no, I'm not saying they're not a problem. I'm saying they make sense because think about we were talking about how our like ancient ancestors lived in tribes and like in packs and stuff, and like that's how they like developed that intelligence and stuff. But they didn't have the communication, the resources that we do. Like cults obviously disconnect you from those resources. And
Not even
stuff,
the reason. Yeah, because and they can
and outward thinking.
they disconnect you from it because you're always idolizing something
Yeah,
external from yourself.
You
We
were
could
stripped of
create
your free
a
thought.
5D cult, but there would be no one leader. Everyone is the leader, and that's the whole idea where it's a oneness consciousness. You can't have a oneness consciousness and also be in a cult, because when you live in a cult, you're just like
You're devoted.
you're
to something
devoted
else.
to something external from yourself, and that's the problem. So
Stop putting the label on cults.
stop calling us
Labels are just labels.
That
But
kinda
they don't
still sounds like
exist.
you're
We are
supporting cults.
we are a
No,
cult.
I'm not supporting cults. I'm not supporting
Pause,
cults.
pause. We aren't a cult, but we are practicing the occult.
Yes, there we go. Clip it.
Alright,
Can you censor me out of that part?
nah, that's not good.
No, that's not going good. Okay, finish it out. Buy our merch, please.
Buy the 5D.
Okay,
merch.
wait, time out. That was terrible. I'm gonna clip that whole cold part out probably. Other than me saying,
Buy some merch, send it to people in Africa. They need shirts on their backs. Be a good person and get them a cool t-shirt.
Facts. 5D's going international.
no, 5D is international. Okay, this is what we're gonna end it with. The 5D is international. Think about how many people outside on our TikTok, how many other countries are viewing our videos. Like
We're
it's crazy
animals.
this reach that we have now, which is like
Because of you guys.
because of
And
you guys.
we appreciate it so much. So grateful. Practice gratuity in your life, and you will get to the fact.